Sonucido the Mage is nearly finished, and I'm very happy to announce that it will be released on the 2nd of December 2022, exactly 2 years after the initial start of development. In the last 2 months I worked a lot on the game. I polished the game, I built in a very hard mode, I will speak about that later. And I also fixed a lot of bugs and improved the game and fixed some missing stuff, etc. And now the game is almost finished. There are only 2 things that are still missing. The first thing is that my fiancée still needs to draw like 4 pictures for the game, maybe 5, but this won't be a problem. And the second part that is still missing is the German localization. When I started development, I thought that Sonucido the Mage would have a lot less words, and I wanted to localize the game in a lot of different languages. I decided against that in the end, because it would be too costly and it would take a lot of time to put in the translation work, because the method in my game works flawlessly and is very robust, but it takes time and isn't fun to implement. But in the end, the cost was the major reason why I decided against that. Sonucido has more words than I initially expected. On the one hand, this is bad news, because the game will now be only localized in English and German. But on the other hand, this is great news, because the game is bigger and has more words, more dialogue, more story parts. I have kind of mixed feelings, but in the end I'm happy how the game is now, and yeah. I worked on a hard mode for the game. The normal difficulty was created with the intention that, first of all, every build is viable. So if you want to play a luck-based character, you can play a luck-based character. It will be harder at times, but it is possible. And on the other hand, that you can't softlock yourself and be in a level and just can't beat the enemies. Sometimes you will need to restart a level more than once to beat it, but it should be still possible, and it was created with the intention. The problem, in a way, is that this game can become a power fantasy in the end, and the more you know about the game, the more it will be a power fantasy in the end. And I have nothing against a good power fantasy in games, but it was too much, and I worked a little bit on balancing, and this took a little bit of time because there are many potions which aren't really necessary, and now there are a little bit less potions in the game, but I still wasn't really satisfied. So I really like games like Age of Decadence, Dungeon Rats and A Legionary's Life. These games have one thing in common, and that is hard turn-based combat. And I really like this, to think about how I approach a situation, etc. I wanted to have this in Sonucido, but the thing is, this isn't the intended audience, and most people won't play this game because of the combat, because the combat is relatively simple. But I still wanted to have the option, and so I decided to have a hard mode. In the normal mode you have 5 points available, which you can freely distribute on your different stats. In the hard mode there are only 2 points available. All enemies are a little bit stronger, and you have permadeath. So if you die you can't restart the level, but need to start in the beginning. Which is punishing, but it's intended for people who really want to have the challenging experience. And I played it. And the game was really hard in the beginning, but after a certain point it also became a power fantasy. You just had too many bombs, and especially too many potions, and if you played it right, you still had a power fantasy in the end. The hard mode was hard, but only in the beginning, and it got relatively easy around the middle of the game. So I decided to take another approach. And now the player can't find almost any potions or bombs after a certain point in the middle of the game. So in the first half of the game you need to collect as much resources as possible to be strong enough for the later levels. It took me a couple of attempts, but in the end I managed to beat the game. And I think it's a real challenge for those who are after a real challenge. and those who want the normal difficulty can play the normal difficulty. Now let's talk a little bit about the game and what you can expect if you buy it. The price point for the game is €7.99. 7.99 euros, 7.99 US dollars, 7.99 pounds. There will be a discount in the release week. How long is the game? For some people this is very important. On the one hand for time-conscious people who don't have a lot of time, but on the other hand for people who want the most hours out of a game as possible. A normal playthrough will take the player around 3 to 4 hours, and if you explore more or take a little bit longer, maybe even 4.5 or 5 hours, but I would say 3 hours should be the minimum which you can expect, and then you can replay the game. On the one hand, you can build a different character with different stats, so maybe in the first run you play a strength, vitality focused character, and then you play a strength luck-based character or a completely luck-based character. There are also a few branches which you won't see because you need to decide for one way. So I think on the first playthrough you will see around 60 to 70% of the game, and I think with the second playthrough you have around 90%. Somebody who does 2 runs, which I would recommend, will play the game for around 5 hours, but you can play the game even more if you want to play the hard mode and beat the hard mode or want to see everything. It really depends how much you want to replay it, but at least 3 hours you should expect. The 2nd of December is the release date for Sonucido the Mage. I hope you try it out. If you haven't already, maybe wishlist the game, and have a nice day. Until next time.